Welcome back to Brother to Brother, where you get real life, real talk from real brothers. But before we get into it, I just want to say thanks again for watching episode 1. Even if it was just 30 seconds, me and my brother really appreciate the support. So please don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and share button, and feel free to drop a comment below. Hello?
This is a Global Tel Link prepaid call from
Jamal Lewis.
This call will be monitored and recorded.
Assalamu alaikum, man.
Walaikum salam.
How you, bro?
I'm good. I'm doing good and blessed this morning, bro. How you doing this morning? Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Brother to Brother. We're your hosts, Raymarr,
And Jamal Lewis.
and we appreciate you guys for joining us today as we continue to give you real life, real talk from real brothers. In this episode, I will be asking the question, why is Jamal still incarcerated? But before we get started, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and share button, and feel free to drop a comment below. Bro, this is episode 2, right? So what I'm thinking is, let's make it a Q&A. I want you to let people know, why are you still incarcerated? All right, is that cool?
Yeah. No problem. I ain't got no problem with that, bro.
Okay. So in the first episode, you had mentioned being waived up. What does it mean to get waived up?
It's basically when a juvenile gets transferred from family court to superior court.
Okay. So why and how is that done?
Well, under New Jersey criminal statute, Title 2A, the state can seek to transfer a juvenile to adult court who has been charged with committing a crime that's considered a first or second degree, or an offense that's considered an adult offense, like homicide, robbery, or kidnapping. The juvenile only need to be 14 years or older according to one part of the statute, and 15 or older according to another part of the statute. The purpose of it is to expose the juvenile to receiving more time if convicted of any one of those offenses. As for who gets weighed up or why, it is sometimes based on the politics of the time, but more often than not, is a person of color from the more urban areas of the state.
So because of getting waived up to adult court, you're now exposed to a much harsher sentence than you would have been if you remained in family court.
Yeah, so like instead of receiving 20 years, which is the max that a juvenile could receive, and only to a third of, I was transferred to adult court and received the max sentence adult can receive for offense commonly known as 30 to life for committing a similar offense.
Okay, so can you explain what does that mean, 30 to life?
All right, okay. A lot of people misunderstand the term because of how it's said, 30 to life. It immediately invokes the thought that the sentence is 30 years, but in all actuality, it's not. The sentence is life, and the 30 years is what I must serve before being considered for parole.
So the reason why they haven't released you after you did the 30 is because you actually have life and not 30 years.
Yes, that's exactly why.
It's like you are basically serving 2 sentences. So how are they able to do that?
Yeah, you're right. But remember, when I was discussing the waiver statute, when I mentioned who and why a juvenile may be waived up or not can depend on the politics of the time.
Yeah, I do.
Well, this is an example of what I mean when I say politics of the time, right? During the President Nixon presidency, there's a desire to squash the heavy political activism at the time, particularly black political activism. So the government officials and agencies began to label activists, particularly black activists, as criminals in the protests and demonstrations that they either led or participated in as criminal activity, right? So once this narrative was established and the sense of hysteria was created by the media, politicians in need of an agenda began to push a hard on crime agenda as part of their campaign strategy. In response to the fear created and to make good on the promises made by the politicians of the era, national laws began to change. In New Jersey, it was the abandonment of Title 2A in exchange for Title 2C. In this change, the sentence term decreased for all offenses, and particularly a life sentence went from 25 years, which an offender served at most 17 years under 2A, to an offender serving 25 years before being eligible for parole under 2C. Now, 2 years later, in 1981, still under disguise of needing to be hard on crime, New Jersey's legislators decided that 25 years was not enough, and so another 5 years was added. 3 years after that, life was then added to the term, not in the way that I or many others have been sentenced. So that you can get a better understanding, I think you should look up the New Jersey sentencing statute for murder. It's NJS 2C semicolon 11-3B, and read it yourself. See what it says.
Okay, all right. But before I pull that up, the statute, do you have any idea why the state decided to keep the 2A juvenile transfer statute after adopting California's 2C criminal codes?
Nah, I have no idea.
That is the NJSA 2C 11-3 murder section B1. All right, I got it right here, B1. Okay. It basically states that murder is a crime of the first degree, but a person convicted of murder shall be sentenced except as provided in paragraphs 2, 3, and 4 of this subsection by the court to a term of 30 years during which the person shall not be eligible for parole or be sentenced to a specific terms of 30 years which shall be between 30 years and life imprisonment, of which the person shall serve 30 years before being eligible for parole.
Yeah, see, that's what I have. But the statute says a specific term of years between 30 years and life, meaning 30 years is the minimum a person can receive, and life is the maximum a person can receive. 30 years to life is not mentioned nowhere in the statute.
And that's why you have been submitting to the court that your sentence is excessive, because you were sentenced to the maximum as opposed to the minimum.
Yeah, that's one of the issues.
Why were you sentenced to the maximum as opposed to the minimum then?
Politics of the time called for it. At the time of my arrest and conviction, you had criminologists saying that there was going to be a surge in the crime rate. And these crimes will be committed by young men, particularly young black men. Wow. And it will be so violent and morally depraved that they will present an alarming threat to society, and they will be impervious to traditional criminal justice and rehabilitation.
So are you talking about the super predator myth that was made popular in the late 80s and the early 90s?
Yes.
Bro, let me clarify a bit for our audience what the super predator myth included and how it was racist really quick.
All right.
Not only did the super predator lead to a wave of harsh criminal justice policies imposed on young black men disproportionately, devastating and already marginalized a vulnerable community, it also reinforced negative stereotypes about young black men and promoted fear and mistrust of young black men that law enforcement used to justify an increase in surveilling and policing of black communities.
Yeah, that's exactly it, bro, in a nutshell. But let me add a little bit more to that. See, the early 90s was also the Bush and Clinton era, and hard on crime became more than just a hot-button topic, such as the super predator myth for politicians to exploit during an election. It had become a bill in violent crime and law enforcement act.
That's the bill more commonly known as the Tough on Crime bill, right?
Yeah, that's it. It was a bipartisan bill supported by both Democrats and Republicans, but initially it was introduced and sponsored primarily by Democrats.
Yeah, that's the bill that was brought up when the current president, Joe Biden, was running for election. The reason the bill was brought was because of how much damage it had done to communities of color. And Joe Biden, who was relying on communities of color to vote for him, was one of the bill's biggest advocates.
Yep. The statements that he made on the congressional floor, moments prior to the Senate voting of the bill, to gain more support for passing the bill, man, them shits was foul and intentionally showed no concern with communities of color, which would be most affected by the passing of the bill.
What did the bill contain?
The bill was constructed to address the rising crime rate that was predicted by the super predator myth. How that was to be done was by incorporating within the bill the hiring of more police officers to increase, like you said, and improve law enforcement efforts and effectiveness, and the imposition of tougher penalties on the convicted.
So now with the super predator myth, The Tough on Crime bill enacted, you being a black male, 16 years of age, raised in a broken home within a disadvantaged community in the city of Newark, New Jersey, you become a perfect candidate for a life sentence.
Yeah, if I weren't already born for it due to how society is structured. You know what I'm saying? But anyhow, before we move along, there's another element, or should I say statute, as to why I was sentenced to life that I almost forgot to mention.
What's that?
The aggravated and mitigating factor statute. These statutes guide a judge sentencing decisions as well.
And how do you do that?
Well, the aggravating factors increase the severity of the sentence through specific circumstances like the nature and gravity of the offense, the person's prior record, the impact on the victim, and the need for deterrence. That can enhance the seriousness of the offense. Mitigating factors, on the contrary, lessens the person's culpability or the severity of the offense. The factors that can be used are a person's age, mental or emotional condition, lack of prior criminal history, and cooperating with law enforcement. The presence of any of these factors can lead to a person receiving a lesser sentence than what would otherwise be imposed.
How does this apply to your sentence?
It is the aggravating factors that the court used to sentence me to life with 30 instead of just 30 years.
What about the mitigating factors like your age? You were 16 at the time. Why didn't the court consider that?
The courts claimed that there was no mitigating factors that could be used, only aggravating factors. For that reason, I was sentenced to the max sentence that the law allows. This was a part of my issue raised on appeal. Of course, the court denied me, but in the past couple of years, there has been some landmark cases that addressed everything from the juvenile waiver law, the juvenile's culpability, maturity, and risk assessment ability, and what is considered appropriate or cruel and unusual punishment when imposing a sentence on a juvenile offender.
What's some of the names and details of these cases? Because you never know who of our audience this information may be useful to.
There are about 10 cases dating back to 1996, but for the sake of time, I'll begin with Raymarr versus Simmons. In 2005, the courts in Raymarr prohibited death penalty for crimes committed by juveniles, but juveniles were still able to get sentenced to life without parole. 5 years after that, there was Florida versus Graham, a case where juveniles convicted of committing armed robbery and attempted armed burglary were sentenced to life without parole. The legal issue in that case was whether imposing a life sentence on the juvenile convicted of non-homicide constituted cruel and unusual punishment. The defense argued that the sentence failed to consider mitigating factors associated with youth, the maturity, the potential for rehabilitation, and the ability to change over time. Relying on scientific research and citing Raymarr as precedents, the courts in Graham established that life without parole sentences for non-homicide offenses committed by juveniles are disproportionate and excessive punishment. The courts also highlighted the need for individual sentencing practice that considered the characteristics of juveniles, provided a meaningful opportunity for rehabilitation. 2 years after that, there's another case, Miller versus Alabama. In that case, you had 2 kids under the age of 18 convicted of homicide offenses who were sentenced to life without parole. On appeal, the offense basically made the same argument as the attorneys in Raymarr and Graham, that their sentence failed to consider unique characteristics of youth, the capacity for change, rehabilitation, and diminished culpability associated with their age. Courts agreed. This ruling was pivotal because not only did the court recognize the characteristics of juvenile, they also acknowledged the potential for rehabilitation and the potential for change among juvenile offenders. The court also declared that imposing a mandatory life without parole sentence on a juvenile violated the Eighth Amendment and required courts when sentencing a juvenile for homicide offenses to consider things like a juvenile's age, maturity, background, and potential for rehabilitation, which have become known as the Miller factor. In 2016, the Supreme Court of Montgomery versus Louisiana held that the decision and the factors in Miller should be applied retroactively.
Retroactively, what does that mean?
It allows individuals previously sentenced to life without parole as juveniles to seek resentencing and the possibility of parole.
So how did these courts' rulings affect the sentences of juveniles like yourself in New Jersey?
The Jersey Supreme Court had already ruled that juveniles could not be sentenced to life without parole for non-homicide offenses in 96 and prohibited life without parole sentences for juvenile in 2001. So these rulings actually did nothing for juveniles in New Jersey until 2017. In State versus Ricky Zuber, who was 16 at the time of his offense, was sentenced to 110 years. The defense in his case argued that Zuber 110-year sentence, although not life without parole, it was still equivalent to life without parole. Zuber would more than likely die before being eligible for parole because the sentence was imposed without taking in consideration what the courts held in Roper, Graham, and Miller. It met the cruel and unusual punishment standards established by the Eighth Amendment. The New Jersey Supreme Court agreed that Zuber's sentence was equivalent to life without parole. Courts further added that there was no mitigating factors that existed within New Jersey criminal statute that could have been considered. Zuber initially received the sentence, and there was still none at the date of the ruling. So the courts vacated Zuber's sentence and sent the case back down to the lower court for resentencing, instructing the lower courts to apply the Miller factor. Zuber's sentence. The court also urged New Jersey legislators to amend the mitigating statutes where it would take into account characteristics that are associated with youth.
Did the legislators make the amendment?
No, and because the legislators did not make the necessary amendments to the statute, and the lower courts in resentencing Zuber only took 30 years off his sentence, the New Jersey Supreme Court made another ruling last year in the combined cases of State versus Zarate and State versus Comer. The courts ruled that juvenile offenders serving lengthy prison terms can ask for a review of their sentence after they have served 20 years. During the review, Chief Justice Rabner said judges can consider whether the juvenile has matured and reformed, appreciate risk and consequences, and has behaved well in prison, plus other factors that could not have been fully considered decades earlier. The court can then affirm or reduce a defendant's original sentence.
So based on this new decision, you can finally have your sentence reviewed then?
Yeah.
Well, what about being paroled? Why hasn't that happened yet? You already got 30 years in.
Well, as you know, I went to parole last year and received a 3-year hit. That means that my release was denied, and after serving another 3 years, I could go back before the parole board to be considered for release again.
So basically, that'll be a total of 33 years that you served. Then what will happen next?
They can then release me, but since I have a license, they can also continue to give me hits.
So what is parole reason for not releasing you?
There was 3 reasons. The first being the offense that I was charged with and my prior criminal record. The second, my inability in the early part of my bid to adjust to being in prison. And lastly, my lack of ties to the community.
Bro, none of this make any sense to me. Your prior criminal record, that was 30 years ago, and isn't that the second time your record was used? Didn't the courts use your prior record to give you life in the first place? And then the other 2 reasons why they denied you is like them using your age against you.
Yeah, and this is why those rulings are important, especially the last one, because it specifically applies to when the juvenile offenders get in relief that more than likely wouldn't receive it facing the parole board because the disproportionate aggravating factors the boards are allowed to use in comparison to the available mitigating factors. I think it's something like 3 to 1.
All right. I want to ask 2 more things. One, I want to ask about your appeal process since you've been in there. And 2, I want to ask about your parole denial when you recently went to parole. So let's kind of jump right into that. All right, bro? So could you briefly describe your understanding of the appeal process and where you currently stand in it?
Yeah. So after you get found guilty or you get sentenced, you have like a 45-minute window to submit a notice of appeal. Once you submit that notice of appeal, if you don't have an attorney, you get appointed attorney from the appellate division, and then from that point on, we'll put together an argument to be submitted to the appellate division.
Okay.
Right?
All right. So what specific grounds are you basing your appeal on? And could you explain why you believe an error occurred during your trial or why your conviction was unjust?
My original appeal, 2 reasons. The first one being that my trial was unfair because they allowed my co-defendant testimony to be submitted to the jury, which is a violation of confrontation rights. That's a 6th Amendment violation.
Okay.
Right? The second one was the sentencing. My argument in there was my sentence was excessive, meaning they gave me more than what was necessary. Remember earlier we talked about the specific within the statute. It had a phrase that said a specific years in life.
Yeah.
That was my initial argument, always been. And then they added the factors I told you about, which is, in my case, is 3, 6, and 9, which is the need to deter the nature of the crime and prior offenses. They used that to enhance my sentence. They didn't take into consideration my age, so that's what was a big part of the argument.
All right, so let me just ask you, so who has been representing you in your appeal process?
Public defender's office, all the way through.
Okay. Can you walk me through the typical steps of an appeal process, and also what has been done so far, and what steps are you currently awaiting?
After you go to the appellate division, and in my case, I was denied, and then I had to go make a petition to the certification. That's what this New Jersey Supreme Court, right? So all that is them making a rule. When you get to ask the court a question based on the statutes and the laws of the state, right? Because each state has its own Supreme Court.
Okay.
So now they grant you certification, meaning they grant you the right to make an argument. So in that means I got denied. The same issues. Violation of my Sixth Amendment right to confront my accuser and excessive sentence. Two more issues, ineffective assistance, but those are basic issues, right? So now once they deny you that, you then have to go, then you can petition the next court, which is the original court that you went to trial and got sentenced in. That's called a post-conviction relief, action for relief. So I went there with the same issues, but an issue added to that was the ineffective assistance of my public defender not making an argument the way I thought it should be made. They denied that. So then after that, you go to the feds. Once you get to the feds, you petition for habeas corpus, right?
Yeah.
So what you do there is you give every issue that you raised in every court prior to that. It's called all-inclusive, and you submit it to the feds. So district court. So what they did was they made like I don't want to say they denied me, but they said the reason why they denied me because my argument wasn't of constitutional dimension. They said there was a violation, but the violation was a state violation, meaning it was a misapplication of state law. Because it was a state misapplication of state law, they couldn't do nothing. So my argument was always been like it's rooted in the Constitution, Sixth Amendment, yada yada yada. They didn't move on it. So now, after that point, you get a second PCR, which I did, same issue, still reading the same issue. Trying to get a look at it, no one is looking at it. In fact, I had got one court to say they was going to give me a hearing, but for some reason, I guess because of how the times go in the courts, my motion was then given to my original judge, and he denied it, saying that the issue was moved, meaning that he already heard it. So then after that, it's basically no longer the appeal process. Now you just got to go into your discoveries and paperwork and try to find issues, because once you go through that process, pretty much it. Now you have to go to the United States Supreme Court, which they don't move on that. Historically, they move on probably like no more than like 3 to 4% of the cases presented in front of them. So the chances of me, small guy like me, case being heard is not going to be. It has to be something of great magnitude, like that case with the guy John Malvo when I was running around doing the sniper. They listen to those type of cases. Those when you said the recently heard Roe versus Wade, all that.
Yeah.
They listen to those type of cases. Those are the type of cases that they hear and they render their attention to.
Okay, so how has this experience affected you personally?
Well, to give you a great, not a great, first one, it teaches you the law. One, because any errors or any mistakes that you make, they're gonna notify you of, and they're gonna make a ruling on deny you based on that mistake, because they tell you there's no such thing as being ignorant to the law. Two, then you get an understanding that there's two laws. One that applies to us, meaning people of color from our neighborhoods and stuff like that, and laws that apply to everyone else, basically, right?
Yeah.
There's many issues that I've argued and seen, and I've seen people years later get the cases overturned. The same issue, the same argument. And I don't know if it's like because of the way I argued it, or I don't know. But I'm saying at root, these people, they're telling you they know what you're trying to get at. Even if you're being redundant or you're being less formal, they still know what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's my greatest thing I ever learned from this whole experience. Like,
What are your emotions and thoughts as you navigate through the appeal process?
Oh, chain gets hot. I don't even got time to really register that. You know what I mean? Because I can only rely on myself. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't have no attorney. I don't have nobody in my family that understands the law, so me explaining and trying to get an understanding from them, it won't even matter. It'd be like a waste of time. So I got to get back into the case and get back into the law library and try to figure it out, because at the end of the day, it's on me.
Yeah.
So there's really no time to, even if I was upset, I was emotionally distraught, I wouldn't even recognize it, because I can't. Time is going by. I don't want to do 30 years. You know what I'm saying? So every time they make a ruling, I'm back at it, and then you can't really waste time because they give you a certain amount of time to get back. So there's no time to sit down like, damn, what I'm going to do. You got to already be in that process mentally. Like, they deny it, I got to keep moving.
How are you coping with the challenges of the appeal process while incarcerated?
Yeah. In the appeal process, or just in throwing time in general, people don't really understand that you don't have no control over where you at, right? So a lot of times when I was catching and getting some of these rulings, I would be in a position where I couldn't get the law library, right? So that'll be like, I might be in a hole. Now this ruling that came back to me and I'm in a hole, and I got 15 days of doing a hole or whatever, for whatever reason, or I might have some solitary confinement time, maybe 6 months. A lot of people don't know that all this stuff they doing with solitary confinement is recent. A good 3 to 4 years ago, we was doing extremely long time in solitary confinement. One time I was in it almost 5 years. But so now you get in these rulings, right? So without access to the law library, right, and limited supplies. So a lot of this stuff sometimes we have to make the argument based off memory of what you read and based off the materials that you have. Like for instance, one time doing an appeal, I had to do it in pencil on regular paper.
Wow.
I mean, they made a ruling on it, but that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
Because I was in a position where I couldn't do it. Or, for instance, something might happen big in the prison, right? And they feel the need to transfer some people, and you caught up in those numbers. Now you get transferred to a whole other prison, way in South Jersey or North Jersey, depending on where you're from. But your mail is still going to the prison that you just went to, right? So now it has to catch up with you. Now they have this thing they used to call was the mailbox rule, where though the time that you submitted or the time the letter was in, and what they call media mail, that would be accredited towards you. The courts done got rid of that. So now all that time is counting. They total that time and say like they only give you a year. So they don't care what took place in between that time. You're still responsible for that. So now you have to make a whole other argument to justify why this time wasn't used in a manner to pursue your appeal. Something that's out of your control. That's one. People don't understand that.
Yeah.
Then these courts, it's not even the court sometimes, because when people hear me say courts, they think justice. I'm not talking about justice. Sometimes it'll be their clerks, and their clerks be having bias, right? Like for instance, I had one that just kept denying my filing based off me not being accurate, not knowing, but clearly understanding that the rules have changed. It's like in 2016. The rules of how you file for appeal had changed. I had no way of knowing that. So I was in South Jersey, and South Jersey people were serving the least amount of time in South Jersey because they're minimum prisons, right?
Yeah.
So they don't usually go on law libraries and keep up abreast with the law because they already done topped out. They already know the day they're going home. So it's like max spots like Training Rawway where they stay aware of these things. So I'm in these spots like 2-3 years, so nobody's aware of how the appeal process has changed. So now I'm filing when I get back up north, and this clerk keep denying me, but this is money out of my pocket that I don't have. But every time you file, you have to make copies and do this paperwork and stuff like that. So now, mind you, you're in prison about 15, 20 years, finances ain't coming that like they used to. People done grew up, people have kids. Mine, for me, because when I came out, I was 16 years old, or y'all was young. Nobody had kids and no responsibilities then. So now y'all got them now. I got to take care of y'all kids. So the money I have to get has to come from inside the prison some type of way. And there's no jobs really in it. So now this money is hurting. So people don't understand that. Now you have to get side hustles and stuff in order just to pay for your appeal. And for instance, some courts be wanting 3 to 4 copies. So at, let's say, 20 pages per copy, that's what you got to, and you want 3 copies, so that's whatever, 60-something pages or whatever. So now, even though it was sent in a mail or whatever, the waiting and all that, that's just that court. Now when you go into the Supreme Court, they want non-copies, right?
Yeah.
Well, check this out. With me, in one scenario, one incident, when I was going to the Supreme Court with the non-copies, for some reason, non-copies ain't get this, right? So you got people in the mail room that's, it's like regular people that don't want to do their job. So it didn't go there because somebody ain't said it. But that's $50 out of my account. And I got a time frame in which I got to get the rest of, to get this argument there. So now, I don't got $50. I got to figure out how to get $50.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even if I had $50, they only paying me $80, whatever. So now, that's all my money going for that. That means no cosmetics, that means no food, that means no stamps, that means no phone, that means none of that. So a lot of people don't see that part. So that's the only part I like to add.
Bro, let's keep it moving and get right into you being denied parole. Could you please describe the circumstances leading up to your recent parole hearing, and what were your expectations going into the hearing?
Well, truthfully, I didn't because of my early complications in my bid. I kind of knew it wasn't going to grant me parole, right? But you could never know. You know what I'm saying, you got to sit in there and have that interview. But during the parole process, it was just like the questioning was kind of like strange because they questioned me on my history in the prison, which wasn't all that. It wasn't all that. I can definitely admit to that. Early in my bid, you couldn't tell me I was to be a model prisoner or to adhere to any laws. You just gave me life. I think I ain't gonna never come home. So anything, like I was saying about getting home, any way I could pay for that, legal copies or whatever I was doing. You know what I mean? Anything that wasn't, considered compromising a man's manhood, I was doing. You know what I mean? So taking, robbing, stealing, hustling, I was doing everything. So now some of these things I got locked up for, got infractions for. So I kind of knew that those things was going to be some of the things that was going to address, right?
Yeah.
But what they did was sort of like try to gloss over my accomplishments. So I had to like stop and like really like get them to see that you're human, because all they got is paperwork, right? They don't got the living, breathing person. All they got is paper, they say. And some of this stuff being accurate, some of this stuff they don't share, because they got the right to keep some things confidential, so you don't know what they're actually looking at. But the things that they did talk about, it was like glossing over my accomplishments, like my program completion. So I have to pull them over and say, listen, even though I went to lockup, I went to assay, when I got out, I went back into a program. It wasn't like I wasn't trying, right? This is me struggling with trying to rehabilitate in an atmosphere or an environment that y'all know is not conducive to that. Secondly, I came in here as a kid, so I have to constantly keep reminding them of that, because the parole standards, the parole policy doesn't acknowledge youthful offenders in adult facilities. So I have to keep telling them like, y'all put people here, gave people 30 years of life because you said these are the worst people in the community, right? So these are the people that I have to look up to be educated to. Like, come on, now I have to be sharp enough or have the level of intelligence to know which person I take from, right? So it may take me a while to get that, because I'm doing it without resources that I don't even have already. I have to build up the resources or the intellectual abilities to make a distinction between a sociopath, and somebody that may have been here innocently. Now, one or the other doesn't actually work here. The one that came in innocently, man, he might not work here because he don't know how to do this, versus the guy that's a sociopath or got antisocial personality disorder. This guy that's just an animal. People get out his way. So now I as a child have to find a balance between these two characters to take from one something and one from the other, just to get me through in my bid. So again, how do I take that? This is what I'm telling them to grow up. So like nobody with your quality of education, someone that's been educated formally, ever came and knocked on my door and told me how to do that. So
okay, so let me get it right there. So basically what I'm hearing is you're saying that you already knew in a way that going in there from all infractions that you had prior, that you pretty much knew you was going to be denied. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, definitely.
Just can you share the reason given for the denial during the hearing?
All right. So this what I was basically getting into, the infractions that I caught. So that's why I was explaining to him, like, it's easy to sit on this end and make that determination But how can you do it if you really gonna serve your position the necessary justice that it's supposed to have? You're supposed to be impartial. You're supposed to try to look at her from my point of view. So that's what I'm giving you, and I'm explaining that nowhere in the parole procedure do they recognize a youthful offender or nobody below the age of 16 doing time in an adult prison. Everything is predicated on you already being an adult, right? So with that comes a certain maturity in thinking. It comes with already a developed mind already, right? But if you came in at 16, your mind is in the process of development, meaning it's grabbing stuff from the environment to incorporate into its character, right? So now if you don't have a safeguard, if you don't know how to do that, you could be incorporating the wrong thing. So I'm telling him, all the people that knew how to do that, they never came to my door. I'm surrounded by people that just do some of the worst shit. Some of the people that experienced some of the worst traumas in their life. And like they done told us, hurt people hurt people. That's what I'm surrounded with. The people that know better, they all on the outside because after a while you realize that they threw you in here for you to die. You was condemned. There was no one here to assist you anyway. So that wasn't the end goal. Rehabilitation, you have to realize, wasn't the end goal. That's what I'm explaining to him. Like, how can rehabilitation been the goal when you took me, somebody 18 years old, and moved me an hour and 45 minutes away from a welfare mother? She has no car. She has no way of transportation. Can't pay no phone bill. Rehabilitation couldn't have been a goal.
Okay, so
yeah,
because so what I'm hearing that basically you giving your immediate thoughts. You telling me pretty much when you got that from them, that's pretty much what your thoughts and your emotions coming from that with them. So just kind of give me, that's what I'm.
Once I'm going into these questions with them, what they're asking me, and they asking me to go into details of why I did that. This is the academic people. These are people that's been formally educated in this space. They're asking the person who hasn't been, why did you make that decision?
So were there any? Okay, so let me ask you: were there any factors mentioned during the parole hearing that you disagree with or feel were misunderstood?
No, they don't give you no factors. They just ask you questions and let you answer.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't be like, oh, this factor right here, you should have did this. See, before I came to prison, they used to tell people how to make parole. They don't tell you that no more. They just drop you in. So that's why I said there's no moments of clarity are needed. That's why when I was talking to them, I'm like, hold up, dude. Do y'all even actually know what goes on in prison? The way they was questioning, like, do y'all even actually understand what goes on in prison? Like, don't nobody come to your cell and be like, especially in max security prison, they don't count you to get out. If this is a minimum prison because you know people going to leave, then it's different programs.
Okay. Are you considering any further actions or appeals in response to the decision?
No, I mean, they just told me to take this program called STARS, which I read the book paperwork years ago. I don't see how that would apply, but because it was basically dealing with housing and employment, but it was like you're doing it in paper, and you know the world is dealing with technology. Everybody on computer, so I'm like, I don't get this because I took a program where though we was able to touch computers to help you deal with Facebook, social media, but this it don't give you none of that. So but I took a program called SEALS. I took another program called Life Skills. I took all these other programs that was dealing with reentry that would help you a little. To me, I felt was a little better, even though I didn't take STARS per their recommendation. Prior to their recommendation, I read the book.
Okay.
So I explained. So I read the book. I don't think I would have took the program if I thought it was something I could use. I'm not trying to wait for something I think I could use.
So let me just ask this. So looking back, is there anything you believe you could have done differently to potentially have a different outcome in your parole hearing?
Oh no, it was nothing because statistically, if you look at statistics, anybody that got a life sentence, 99% of them do not make their first eligibility.
Okay.
I'm talking about there's a guy downstairs from me right now, my bro. He got one charge. He was raised up as a juvenile, so he got one charge in 31 years. He went to parole. They gave him a 3-year hit.
Oh wow.
He ain't never been arrested prior to this charge. You know what I'm saying? So, it's different scenarios. And this is what I explained to him, too. Like, when you're sitting in here, but I told one thing they have done, they're giving out less of time. Some guys, prior to me going to parole, like, let's say, like 5 years ago, these guys were getting 10-year hits, 20-year hits. They were getting almost whole new bids.
Wow.
Long-term bids with the life sentences. Everybody else, they couldn't do that, so they had to go according to what was their max. But the life, you don't have no max. They was giving guys literally 20-year hits.
Despite the setback, what are your goals and aspirations moving forward? How do you envision your future, and what steps do you plan to take to work towards those goals?
I mean, it's basically just the same. Like I told you before, I can't stop, I can't lay down because I'm the only one that's gonna be responsible for me, as well as like y'all out there. So I just gotta do what I do. I just gotta be open to whatever's available, and that's what I try to like explain to them. Like, there's nothing that's in concrete. There's nothing in concrete for nobody that's free. Society is structured in a way right now where things are changing, so you just gotta be open to that. I'm open to whatever that's gonna allow me to live my life as a free man. I had a goal. I had an idea, but again, I'm aging at the same time.
Yeah.
So some things, some goals and ideas now change. I'm getting to the age where once I get out of here, I'm close to retirement age.
Yeah.
So what can I actually do? So now my skills have to be more intellectually based, like freelance writing, which I explained to them. I have to move towards that. But how long do I have in a manual labor job?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Trying to figure that out. My goal is to do what we're doing now. Continue along this line. Continue to push the publishing company, things like that.
Bro, I just want to say thank you for sharing your thoughts and your feelings regarding your appeal process and your recent parole denial. And also, bro, your perspective is very valuable. And I hope our discussion today provides insight into your experience. Is there anything else you would like to share or discuss before we end this episode?
Just to say that I appreciate what you're doing. I think we got a gym here. I think we should keep working out it and, banging it out, getting out the knots and the kinks. And I think this thing going to develop into something real good because the community, and they can really use this and get a better understanding of a lot more things that we're going to share and take it from our experiences, and especially for the younger generation where they don't have to actually experience some of this stuff firsthand.
And with that being said, I just want to thank you guys again for tuning in and listening to another episode of Brother to Brother, where you get real life, real talk from real brothers. We thank you again. Peace.
Yes, we appreciate your input. We appreciate your likes. We appreciate your comments. We got a lot more to come, so please continue to support us and follow us. Follow us on all social media platforms. Brother to Brother. Real talk, real life, between real brothers. One.